Evening, folks. Welcome to the Chris Salcedo Show Worldwide here on the Vida television network. Happy you've made us part of your evening. Hope you had a great weekend as well. We have a lot to get into tonight, as we typically do. I think a sufficient enough time has passed, and the facts are pretty much in about the terrorist attack our nation and New York City endured last week. Want to get your feedback, as always. ChrisSalcedo.com, voicemail or email services available for you there, or at Chris Salcedo TX, instantaneous feedback on Twitter. Governor of the state of New York, Cuomo, he got in front of the cameras shortly after the terrorist attack last week and had the following to say.
You will see more security forces, but that's only because it's an abundance of caution and not a signal of anything else. And there'll be continued investigation and justice will be done. But again, to those we lost, they are in our thoughts and our prayers.
Thoughts and prayers. I think this audience in particular, you all by instinct said a prayer to God for those families, as did your liberty-loving Latino here. That's our default. That is where we turn to in our times of need. We don't turn to government, we turn to God. I'm reminded of a recent tragedy this country endured with a shooting out in Las Vegas, when politicians like Governor Cuomo here said the same thing. Thoughts and prayers to the families who had their loved ones ripped away by evil. But not like our reaction, my reaction and yours, where we nodded our head and said, yes, thoughts and prayers. The liberal left in this country said something different. They sneered at us and said, I don't want your thoughts and prayers. I want your guns. I want your guns. That's what they said. Just wait. Give me gun control. Save your thoughts and prayers, they sneered. Not that we would ever be as callous and as shallow as to stoop to that level. But can you imagine what would happen if you or I, in the wake of righteous call for thoughts and prayers, if we had responded that way? Of course, the left wing has never taken to task for such barbarism. But I thought that was a good point of departure to start our conversation this evening. Now let's have a review of how we got here. That's Chuck Schumer. That's 2006. Chuck Schumer is defending a diversity lottery immigration policy. The individual who perpetrated the latest terrorist attack by taking a rented truck onto a bike path and mowing people down it was a result of a bill that you're going to hear Chuck Schumer take credit for. A liberal bill that said diversity is the goal when you're looking at immigration. Really? Here's Chuck Schumer singing the praises of this law.
The soon-to-be pending amendment, which would essentially do away with the original purpose of the diversity visa program. Now, as a member of the House, I helped create this program, which my colleague Senator Kennedy created here in the Senate in 1990.
Now, you just heard Chuck Schumer take credit for this. A lot of the Democrat liberal apologists are saying, oh, no, this was a bipartisan bill. True, it was signed into law by President George H.W. Bush. However, this was a different time. This also was pre 9/11. Well, actually, 2006 was post 9/11, but the inception of the bill back in the 1990s, that's when it was first created and was signed into law by George H.W. Bush. This speech given in 2006 was post 9/11. I can't fathom how Chuck Schumer, after New York was attacked, could actually pull for this law to continue. But he did.
It had a very simple purpose, and that was this. Our immigration laws were based on family reunification and certain other qualifications, so there were whole ranges of countries for which people could not get visas. They tended to be European an African.
Chuck Schumer operates under the flawed premise that everybody around the globe has a right to be in the United States of America. I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that that is not true. Everybody that is born on this planet doesn't have a right to enter the United States of America. But progressive liberals, they advocate for this kind of nonsense.
Even though the vast majority of Americans were descendants of Europeans and Africans, but because for several generations no people had come from those countries, the people who wanted to come were either third cousins or unrelated to people here, and the family unification, a very noble purpose, took predominance, and the overwhelming majority of immigrants came from the Caribbean, Latin America, and Asia.
He says that like it's a bad thing. You know, what's the matter with folks coming in from Latin America legally, Chuck Schumer?
This diversity program was a small program, and it was intended to allow some from other countries to come. And in fact, my city of New York has dramatically benefited from this program.
Well, I think the jury is still out on how dramatically New York has benefited from this program. I think Chuck Schumer, the 8 families who lost loved ones to a radicalized Islamic fundamentalist terrorist, might take issue with your evaluation of this program.
And diverse countries such as Ireland, Poland, Nigeria have had large numbers of immigrants be able to come, settle roots, and really help the diversity of New York and the diversity of America. So this is an excellent program, and nobody has said it's done a bad job. It's small. There are only about 50,000 visas a year.
50,000 people a year who are admitted into the United States on one criteria: diversity. The question I have for all of you out there is, should diversity be at all a consideration when you're vetting individuals to come into the United States? It's a fair question, number one. Number two, when did our immigration policies when were they rolled out to say, we must have people come in here to immigrate for diversity's sake, not for the economic benefit of the United States, but for diversity's sake? When did that become a predicate? When did that start? How many of you believe that diversity actually should be the goal when it comes to legal immigration? I don't think it should be. I don't think it should be a consideration whatsoever. The only thing that should be considered is this of benefit to the United States of America economically? Economically, period. Certainly we shouldn't go to states that are harbors of radicalized Islamic harborers of radicalized Islamic fundamentalist terrorists and say, you must come in because, diversity is making sure that we get as many people here in the United States as possible who wants to kill Americans. That's the kind of diversity, Chuck Schumer, I can do without, to be quite frank. Mr. Schumer continued.
So I would plead with my colleagues, keep the diversity visa program. It is small, 50,000 a year, from all the groups that want more educated immigrants to come to America. We do not hear any need to take away from this program to add more. They're very happy with what Senator Specter has done in the bill, as am I, which is...
Yeah, the Uzbeki native, Uzbekistan is where this terrorist originated from. And Chuck Schumer says, we need these kind of people, these educated. Wow. I don't know how much benefit we saw from an Uzbekistan native coming into the United States and killing in the name of ISIS. Chuck Schumer continued.
Greatly increase the numbers of H-1Bs and other visas for these folks, and we can have both. We do not have to rob Peter to pay Paul. As I ride my bike around New York City on the weekends, I see what immigrants do for America. And this program has dramatically helped.
Just a sad bit of irony as the terrorist jumped into a rented truck and jumped onto a bike path and murdered 8 Americans. Chuck Schumer says he was out on his bike, noticing all the good that immigrants gave to New York. Boggles the mind, folks, boggles the mind. Here was Chuck Schumer in the wake of the attack, not saying, I'm sorry I was wrong about this program. No, he decided he would attack President Trump.
President Trump, where is your leadership? The contrast between President Bush's actions after 9/11 and President Trump's actions this morning could not be starker. Again, Mr. President, President Trump, where is your leadership? I'd say in closing, I have always believed that immigration is good for America. I believe it today. President Trump, instead of politicizing and dividing America, which he always seems to do at times of national tragedy, should be bringing us together and focusing on the real solution, anti-terrorism funding, which he proposed to cut in his most recent budget.
Yeah, and here we go, the gimmickry. I don't know about you folks, but I don't want to be lectured by individuals who started politicizing the death of people in Las Vegas and blaming your Second Amendment rights for it. Isn't it ironic that liberals are okay to politicize an event when they want to go after your rights? But the minute we say, wait a minute, why don't we look at the record? Why don't we look at what happened, why this happened? You can directly tie this terrorist attack to Chuck Schumer's law that he championed, this diversity lottery. And Donald Trump came out and said, this is insane. We need to have a merit-based immigration system, not a diversity-based system. The color of your skin or your country of origin should not be the basis on which you enter the United States of America. The only consideration should be, how do you benefit the United States of America? Period. End of sentence. By the way, here's what the President of the United States had to say about this.
We have to get tough. We have to get smart. We have to do what's right to protect our citizens. We will never waver in the defense of our beloved country, ever. And we'll never, ever forget the beautiful lives that have been taken from us. That was a horrible event, and we have to stop it, and we have to stop it cold. We also have to come up with punishment that's far quicker and far greater than the punishment these animals are getting right now. They'll go through court for years. At the end, there'll be who knows what happens. We need quick justice, and we need strong justice, much quicker and much stronger than we have right now. Because what we have right now is a joke, and it's a laughing stock. And no wonder so much of this stuff takes place.
Well, the vast majority of Americans, I think, agree with you, Mr. President. Back in a minute, folks. Chris Salcedo Show Worldwide on the Vida television network. Welcome back, everybody. It's Chris Salcedo Show Worldwide here on the Vida television network. Guy over my right shoulder. His name is Richard Manning, president for Americans for Limited Government. They do a lot of good stuff on behalf of conservatives and actually on behalf of all Americans, really, even though liberals don't appreciate what they do in Washington, D.C. Mr. Manning, welcome back to the Salcedo Show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Chris.
First off, let's talk about the Mueller indictments. I've got to say, and we just talked about this extensively last week, that there wasn't a lot of there. Was there?
No, there was very little there. What Mueller did is he basically did the job of the U.S. attorney rather than the job of a special counsel. The indictment has nothing to do with the Trump campaign, has nothing to do with any kind of Russian collusion or Russian interaction into the American electoral system. What it has to do with is Paul Manafort was apparently involved with the Ukrainian government and used there's something to deal with a rug salesman, and it's really just it's everything but what it should be. So it really minimizes what Mueller's really doing, and it says here's a guy who's running a rogue DOJ, rogue Department of Justice. He's bringing an indictment on something which he should have turned the facts over to the Department of Justice and said, this is in your wheelhouse. You deal with this. It isn't what we're doing. But instead, he's basically giving anybody associated with Trump a prosecutorial proctology exam that is designed to try to intimidate them into saying something rightly or wrongly about Donald Trump in terms of the so-called Russian collusion, which in and of itself remains to be proven in any way, shape, or form.
Oh, that's pretty fair. And you know what? Even with Papadopoulos, the guy who admitted to wrongdoing, the wrongdoing he admitted to was lying to federal investigators. Definitely a no-no, but it has nothing to do with getting to the bottom of Russians' interference in our elections. And let's be fair. Paul Manafort and the group he worked for a significant period of time, is my understanding, the Podesta group, that was revealed by Tucker Carlson, that Paul Manafort worked for this group of Democrats. And Democrats have a long history of working with pro-Russian elements, pro-Soviet elements. And you know what? Manafort did it too, and he deserves what he gets.
Well, that's one of the things. People are innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah.
But, here's what it comes down to. The regime that he was supporting, that he was doing nothing different than what the Obama people did when they were going around running political campaigns against people like Netanyahu.
Yep.
They were running the anti-Brexit campaign, or the anti-Brexit campaign. They were involved in all these international campaigns and providing services to all these international figures. And it's absolutely, from that perspective, he didn't do anything different than what the Obama people were doing, and you can't hold him accountable for that. What you can hold him accountable for is if he didn't report it correctly, if he didn't follow the law, and that remains to be seen. But it certainly isn't the purview of a special counsel, and it's certainly, once he found this, he should have turned it over. But you and I both know why he didn't, because Mueller wants to use leverage against Manafort and others to get them to testify against somebody else, to get them to turn on somebody. And so this is all about a prosecutorial abuse of power, where they sit there and they squeeze somebody and make it so we can run you out of money and we can ruin you, or you can ruin somebody else. It doesn't matter what the truth is. It matters about getting scalps on the wall for this guy. And quite honestly, Rod Rosenstein, you want to point a finger at somebody, Rod Rosenstein is this guy's friend. He's a deputy attorney general. He appointed Mueller, and he worked with him when he was at the Department of Justice, and Mueller was the FBI director. And Rosenstein is the one who is failing to keep oversight over Mueller. He's the one who's failing to do his job, because he should be telling Mueller right now, you're not running a rogue DOJ. You are supposed to be looking at this, at the specific Russian intrusion. You're not doing that. And here's where you start. You start with the dossier. And you start with the dossier. Let's figure out what they paid for, what they got, and how they used it, and if they were in fact running an op against the Trump campaign to try to entrap them. Yeah, that's what they should be looking at.
Yeah, and not only that, I mean, don't forget that Bob Mueller, he was the FBI director during this bribery investigation that we didn't know about until 2017, that was being run back in 09 and 10. Bob Mueller hired a whole bunch of partisan left-wing Democrats as lawyers for his special investigation, and they seem to now. Granted, he may see the light, and he may actually dive into the Democrat shenanigans when it came to Fusion GPS. We know the Democrats and Hillary Clinton paid the Fusion GPS, the Russian-affiliated Fusion GPS, for this fake Trump dossier. That's illegal. You can't pay a foreign government. Now, remember what Democrats were saying, Mr. Manning, when Donald Trump Jr. just took a meeting with a Russian lawyer. They were saying that was treasonous. Here's Hillary Clinton and the Democrat Party paying the Russian government for information on, if what Donald Trump Jr. did was treason, what do you call what the Democrats were doing?
Well, what the Democrats are doing is lying. But it's but when you get down to it, the meeting that Donald Trump Jr. took is really significant because it was with a woman named Natalia
Vianetskaya.
That's what it is.
Yes.
Yeah, I just call her Natalia Nogoodnik. But nonetheless, she pops up a couple of times, and it's really suspicious.
And who does she work for? Who else does she work for?
Well, she actually hired Fusion GPS.
Exactly, affiliated Russian agent with hiring Fusion GPS. It's all the Democrats.
Fake dossiers against foreign policy people who are operating against the Russian interests. So we have the same actress. They can't even bother to get a different actress. You have the same actress involved in one scam with Fusion GPS as the client, and the next scam with Fusion GPS trying to set up the son of the President of the United States.
Yeah.
That's apparently they don't have a lot of people on their payroll, but it's just indicative of how closely knit this thing is.
Well, and don't forget who's paying for all this: Hillary Clinton and the Democrat Party.
That's correct. Hillary Clinton and Democratic Party are paying for it. So here's what you got to, I believe, I think the facts will bear this out. I believe if you crack the Fusion GPS nut, you get to the bottom of this.
I agree.
And the fact that Mueller is looking everywhere but there tells me that he is not. He's either Inspector Clouseau, or he's Inspector Javert, and he doesn't really care about what the truth is. He's out to get the biggest scalp he can.
I agree.
And Hillary paid the bills, so he's not going after Hillary.
Yeah, Javert. And you know what? Don't forget, it was James Comey and director of the CIA, Brennan, and DNI Clapper. They all knew that this Fusion GPS dossier was fake and phony, and they elevated it to actual intelligence to undermine the President of the United States, Donald Trump. Richard Manning.
Well, we know that. That's right, Chris. We know that because Comey told the president, this is an example of the kind of things they can dig up on you. Okay, so he said it was fake when he presented the president, but it's the underlying fact of the special counsel.
Got it.
So people can't forget. Even Comey admitted it was fake.
Richard Manning, everybody, president of Americans for Limited Government. Let's move on from the fake stuff to something that's actually real and harms us. What is on Americans for Limited Government's radar screen as you and I speak tonight?
Well, last week we put out a Halloween video featuring Richard Cordray and Mel Watt as being zombie regulators who still are hanging around in spite of the fact that it's now 9 months into the Trump administration. Now, Cordray is particularly a hard case. He's a guy who...
let me tell the folks who Cordray is. He is the appointed director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, by the way, who was appointed illegally and unconstitutionally by Barack Obama in a recess appointment when the Congress wasn't in recess. So that's how Cordray, he got in under shady circumstances, and he runs a shady department that's not even, you know what, before we get into much more deeply discussion about this, Richard, describe for everybody watching exactly where the funding for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau comes from, because there is no jurisdiction that we, the people, have over this so-called government agency.
Well, Elizabeth Warren, well-known Indian from Massachusetts, was the architect of the Consumer Financial Protection Board, and it's created in a different way. Congress does not control the purse strings of the CFPB like they do other agencies. It's directly related to the Federal Reserve. So all of their budget goes to the Federal Reserve and comes from the Federal Reserve, and all of their enforcement powers come from the Federal Reserve. Their enforcement is over the banking system, the financial services system, which the Federal Reserve also oversees and runs and regulates. So you have this enforcement agency that has absolute power. The executive director, Cordray, has absolute power over the financial system in America in that position. And the Republicans, to their credit, are trying to change that by changing Dodd-Frank and eliminating some of the powers that board has, and forcing them to be, at least we could pretend that Congress could defund them.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what the status is. So this guy has absolute power.
You know,
Absolute
I heard someone describe the CFPB as now has eclipsed the IRS as the most powerful alleged agency in the federal government, because you really can't say it's in the purview of the federal government because it has no accountability to we the people. But I have heard that is the case. Do you agree?
Oh, I agree 100%. It doesn't have the same capacity to strike terror into the individuals, but in terms of the entire banking system, they have the capacity to make or break you as a bank, and that's pretty powerful. And so it's a far more influence than the IRS.
I agree.
And here's what Cordray has done, and he passed some regulation while Trump was elected. He passed a regulation through the CFPB that would have taken away the ability for people, consumers, to go into arbitration against banks rather than having to become part of a class action lawsuit. He did that in spite of the fact that the CFPB's own study showed that our people in arbitration get about $5,000 on average, and people who go in a class action suit get about $35 on average, because the trial lawyers suck up all the money in a class action suit. And usually you'll get a coupon for something and, free dry cleaning somewhere. So it really isn't in the consumer's interest. He put the regulation through. Congress just rescinded it just this week. We talk about the things Congress doesn't do, but they did use the Congressional Review Act to rescind that regulation, and President Trump is expected to sign that bill.
Well, isn't that indicative, though? If the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, is supposed to be there for everyday Americans, and one of its policies it's passing benefits the trial lawyers, I think we have an indication of why it's really there, not to benefit we the people, but to benefit liberal extremist constituencies.
But this points out why President Trump needs to fire Cordray now. Cordray is running for governor of Ohio next year.
Oh, good.
That is what he's doing. He set it up. Everybody in Washington, D.C. knows. Everybody knows. The people he regulates know that. So what do you think they're going to be doing to try to curry favor with Cordray? Do you think they're going to be sitting there and saying, gee, we want to make certain that we're donating to the Ohio Republican Party? No, donating to the Ohio Democrat Party.
You know what, Richard? You know what? I want you guys to keep an eye. You guys keep an eye on Richard Cordray, and we're going to have you back on, and we're going to make sure that we continue to watch what this guy does, because he's harmed the country as CFPB. He'll harm Ohio if he's governor out there, although Kasich isn't doing much better. Richard Manning, president of Americans for Limited Government. Sir, always appreciate the time and the expertise. It's been fun. We'll see you again on the Chris Salcedo Show Worldwide.
Anytime, Chris. Anytime.
And that's going to do it for the Chris Salcedo Show Worldwide for this evening. Hope you have a great one, folks. Keep in touch with the show. ChrisSalcedo.com. You can leave a voicemail. You can leave a regular email or instantaneous access to the program on Twitter at Chris Salcedo TX, at ChrisSalcedotx, as in Texas. By the way, speaking of Twitter, did you hear they're contemplating upping to 280 characters? Will it be Twitter if they do that? Will it still be Twitter? Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow on the Vida television network.